Here are the little nuggets, okay? One nugget that came out is that the Flyers have had some, they've had some meetings. And now, again, this doesn't mean that they're going to draft any of these guys, okay? We've heard the names O'Brien. We've heard the name Brady Martin. We know that Michael Misa would be interesting, especially if he falls past 2. What does Chicago do? What does Utah do? There are rumors this morning that Utah might trade their number 4 overall pick to the Rangers. God knows what that means. But the Flyers apparently have had a few additional meetings, and at least one with somebody that they might not have initially been thought to have interest in. Now, it could be a smokescreen. It doesn't mean that it's absolutely going to happen. It doesn't mean that it will happen. But I want to go to one of the guys, okay? One player who confirmed they met with the Philadelphia Flyers is a guy who maybe would not have fit the mold before the Trevor Zegras signing. And that, of course, is none other than the guy that many consider to be one of, if not the best wings in this draft, Porter Martone. So it comes out earlier on Thursday, Cam Robinson reporting. Porter Martone tells us that he had a couple of last-minute meetings with Philly and Boston before landing in L.A. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to mean a lot. There are rumors that Boston is trying to trade up into the top 5, maybe to the top 6. I don't think the Flyers are going to trade out of 6 to let Boston go up and get their guy. Is it interesting that Porter Martone met with the Flyers? Yeah. Could it be a last-minute meeting because the Flyers just went out and got Zegras and they think he's going to play center? Maybe. Would Martone bring some size to the lineup at 6'3"? Yeah, he would. One of the things that we do know is that the Flyers have a smaller roster. That's not being unfair. Konechny's not huge. Brink isn't huge. Mishkov isn't huge. I have a lot of size. Would Martone represent a size upgrade on the wing? He would. Do I think they're going to take him? No. Do I at least like to know that publicly they met with him and they did their due diligence? Yeah, I do like that. Here's the one that's more interesting. This is the one that people have been waiting for. This is one that is potentially very, very interesting because this is a guy who a year ago was thought to be the number 1 pick in this upcoming draft, who has fallen down some boards, and size-wise doesn't blow you away, but skill-wise certainly can. James Hagens puts out that he was not only that he met with Philadelphia, he went down to Philadelphia after the combine to meet with the organization. Now, what does that mean? Well, if you remember, if you go back to when the Flyers ultimately ended up with a slipping, falling Matvei Mishkov, right, who fell to them at number 7, should not have been the number 7 overall pick in that draft, but geopolitical things got in the way, and a KHL contract led to him falling to the Flyers, and also he would meet with the Coyotes, if reports are to be believed. James Hagens is a guy that people do believe could ultimately be available at number 6. Now, I go off of skill, I go off of talent, I go off of what pops on film, okay? I'm not going to tell you that I'm the most knowledgeable guy, that I'm exceptional at evaluating players just based on film. Hagens, to me, is a guy who would be really, really interesting. And he's a guy that, like, I fear what happens if you pass on him. I fear what happens if you take Brady Martin, who might end up being a better 200-foot player, at least initially, than Hagens would be. A guy who's getting comps to Couturier, I saw Mike Richards' name get thrown out. I don't think either of those comps are particularly fair or accurate, but it's to give you that idea, like 200-foot player, kind of center. I would be ecstatic if on Friday night we're doing the Snow the Goalie press night show, draft night show, outside of the War Room, and then we get to chat with a few people who are responsible for drafting James Hagens. That would be a hell of a pick. Would be a very, very interesting pick. And again, you would then be looking at a guy who could have been the number 1 overall pick over Connor Bedard and Matvei Mishkov if he had been, like, I don't know, Canadian, American, whatever. You would potentially be getting a guy who many thought a year ago was going to be the number 1 overall pick in James Hagens at number 6. And then you go, wow, that's something to build around. Now, Hagens not expected to be in the NHL this upcoming season. Now, could he potentially come in and knock your socks off? And for a team that does have voids at center, could there be a scenario here where you say, all right, some combination of Hagens, Cates, Zegras, and Couturier are your centers. Maybe. I think it'd be crazy, because then that means that Coots and Zegras are definitely your 1 and your 2. Cates probably gets moved to 4C, which is a role I think he could play. Are you really going to have Hagens be your third-line center at his size, at his age, at his frame? I don't think so. I think no matter whoever the Flyers end up taking, highly unlikely they make the team. And then there are going to be people who ask the question, well, what about Jet Lashenko? Like, what does that mean for him? Cates got extended. Zegras is here. Presumably, he's going to play well enough to get a contract. Couturier is going to be here. And then if you draft Hagens, what does that do to Lashenko? I got to be honest, and I got to say this thing. Okay? I don't give a shit what it means for Jet Lashenko if you take a center. Lashenko might end up being a really good player. He might. I'm not convinced he will be. I'm not convinced that he's ever going to be worth a first-round pick. I'm not convinced that he was the best pick last year. Now, physically, it seems like he would be much more ready to take on an NHL season. And in fact, he might make the team out of camp. And he might spend the whole season up, or large chunks of the season, with this team. And so maybe you do get a combination of Couturier, Cates, Zegras, and Lashenko as your centers this season. Certainly wouldn't be a bad thing. And if you draft a Hagens or an O'Brien or a Desnoyers or I can't imagine Frondel's going to fall, but there have been a couple of rumors that he might fall. You get a center in here, and that guy gets to develop for another year or two. You never know what it's going to look like in another year or so. I'd always err on the side of have center depth than worry about, oh, well, we took a center last year. Oh, we just traded for Zegras. We don't need another center. Now we can go and get Porter Martone. If Martone is the best player available at number 6, and you think that his ceiling is significantly higher than the other centers who are on the board, by all means, take him. Shouldn't rule it out. Hagens, to me, is a guy that I'd be really interested in seeing the Flyers take at 6.